Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Canadian Rocketship Companies, where we profile Canadian startups who can help you accelerate your career. I'm your host, Alex Norman, and this week I'm joined by the amazing Kevin, co-founder and president of Humi. If you have any questions while we're recording this, you can ask them by commenting in the media you're watching it. So, for example, if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on YouTube, just add a comment and we will see it and bring it into the show. So let's get started. Love to have Kevin come on stage. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Excuse me. Start.
Yeah, you're okay there. You're not gonna die on us.
I'm not gonna die. There's no COVID. I'm feeling good. It's fantastic to be here. I really appreciate you guys having us on the show.
Well, I'm super excited to have you join us. Before we get into Humi, why don't you give us a 30-second background on who you are and what you did prior to Humi?
For sure. So I've got a bit of a weird and non-typical background, and everyone has their own journey. I grew up in Toronto, and it was in a fairly conservative family where my mom was a dentist and my dad was a doctor, and they were of the mindset that for me to have a good life, I had to pick a profession that was one of those two professions. I've always been super entrepreneurial, lemonade stands as a kid, my first real business before high school, even during college, a whole bunch of, bootstrapped side gigs. But I actually, post-college, went to dental school and graduated as a dentist. So I still am a licensed dentist, which is weird into itself. But for the first 2 years post-dental school, I would work 3.5 days, as I graduated dental school, I knew for certain I wanted to build software companies, and I would work 3.5 days a week as a dentist, pay off my student loans, be able to float myself, and the rest of my time was spent building products. Until I eventually left and started my first venture-backed startup about a decade ago, and this is my second time around.
And the first product was a BDC, if I remember correctly. So tell us about the first startup.
First startup was originally called Insta Radio, and we renamed it to Roar. But if you're familiar with Clubhouse, it was almost exactly that. So, timing wasn't great. But if you look at the arc of the App Store, it was one of the first live streaming audio apps, or live streaming apps, period, in the App Store. And at the time, it was an interesting ride. We raised a little bit of venture capital. We, at our peak, I think we had 3 million monthly unique listeners. We also sorts of weird YouTubers and interesting people using the app. It eventually didn't work out at the time. If you were a social mobile startup, there was no real business model. You had to hit a really large scale in order to have any sort of outcome. And it eventually didn't work out. Tons of great learnings, and that's what brought me to where I am today. So I'm very thankful for it.
So explain to people that don't know, what does Humi do?
So Humi helps companies be employers. And by that, what I mean is, in the same way that Shopify helps businesses become merchants, to sell something, it kind of combines all the different workflows and jobs to be done in one simple connected spot. We do the same thing for employing people, specifically Canadians. So there are a lot of jobs to be done around hiring, onboarding, compliance around document signing and storage, tracking time off, paying people properly, performance management, recruiting. We take all of those independent workflows, which for most companies are, in siloed, non-connected places, and put them into one simple spot. So it gives them a ton of leverage to spend less time on the menial tasks of employment and more time on the things that really move the business forward.
So I love that. So it's basically frees up the management team from administrative work that needs to get done.
Exactly. So at different levels of a company's life, this means different things. If you're in the phase where you're 5 to 20 people, it's normally an executive in the company or an administrator who's responsible for all this stuff, and they get that time back to go focus on other things. Once a company gets larger, we have companies who are 500 to 1,000 people. It is formal, people management people, and instead of making spreadsheets are up to date, they're being more thoughtful about how to onboard people so that they are into the culture better, how to like filter people out, do reviews, a lot of the things that like really matter to making companies successful, as opposed to like, there was a time off request, let's, reconcile it on the spreadsheet and make sure it gets into payroll, because that eats up a ton of time and it is like prone to tons of costly errors.
So like you mentioned, it's quite different than, let's say, Clubhouse type company. So what was inspiration behind Humi?
Yeah, absolutely. So the common thread between two is that I was looking for something that would have large impact. With the first company, the idea was we democratize access to audio publishing, the same way YouTube did it for video, Instagram did it for photos. And the idea with Humi is that we can build a platform that uplifts not only SMBs in the country, but also the people who work within them. If you look at the SMB landscape in Canada, it's like 85% of all employed individuals in Canada. So it's like the heart of our economy. And if we could help them become better employers, not just for the administration and the companies themselves, but there's a like opportunity to profoundly impact the underlying people. And the big differences between the first two, and frankly, a big reason why I chose this business model. The first one, when raising capital and building the business, it's mostly done on vanity metrics, I want to call them, like things that aren't, perfect measurements of how the business is progressing. X times on the app, etc. With a SaaS app, it is dollars in a bank account. So it's a much pure measure of how the business is progressing.
And you said you focus on Canadian only or Canadian companies. What's the rationale behind that? Is there unique needs for it? Is we're an underserved market?
Yes.
Besides living in Toronto.
Absolutely. So a little bit of all that stuff. The original inspiration behind the business was in learning about SaaS specifically. Gusto and Zenefits at the time were the fastest growing SaaS companies ever. But they didn't operate in Canada, and it was clear that they wouldn't for a long time. And when I started digging into it, very quickly realized that are real barriers to entry. And like the moats are built around a lot of the regulated financial products. So for instance, running payroll in Canada, there's only 9 companies who have been approved by the CRA to remit taxes and actually process payroll. And that took a couple of years to bring to market. And there are a couple other products internally that we service that the companies in the States that were fast growing and providing the value that I wanted to provide up here, it was obvious that they wouldn't be up here for years, if not like a decade plus. And the initial thinking was we could get this to venture scale, create a ton of value. What became evident pretty quickly is that the much bigger opportunity here was around the financial services that naturally integrate with the system of record.
So I guess it sounds like you've expanded your scope. So how's Humi progressed over the years, like from when you launched to what you do now?
Yeah, so the common theme of building systems that support people remains intact. What we've learned is that those financial products that naturally integrate with the system that we're building are extremely important support systems for individuals. And when you look at how those products are sold, we effectively have a massive advantage in acquisition of customers. If you look at fintech generally, there's 3 pillars of things you need. You need the data set to be able to sell the products. You need to acquire the trust of the consumer, and you need the ability to actually service the products and move money. And that provides us with all 3, and much better unit economics than a traditional financial player or even a like generation 1 fintech company. Yeah. So in the future, like the aim here is not to look like a sexier version of Ceridian or ADP. They do their own thing, and into the future, this company will is likely to look a whole lot more like a combination between Manulife and TD, a larger financial institution.
I guess you already have the relationship with the customer, for lack of a better word. So it's an ability and a trusted one because you're helping with payroll, you're helping with HR issues. So they know they know what you're doing. And just out of curiosity, because you hear Canadian only plays, and there's always this advice in the ecosystem, or there used to be, hey, Canada only play doesn't work. I know you went through YC, you've raised money. So has a Canada only play ever been, an issue in building the business?
It has. It's the double-edged sword. It's been a huge help, but also, it's created a lot of obstacles when it comes to raising money. It's hard to build because like if you're a VC looking at the space, your mind just goes to the US, Canada is not being a big enough market. But when you look at the underlying products that we're selling in Canada, there are two ways to build a $1 billion company focused in Canada: real estate and financial services. You look at our financial services companies that are at scale, they are absolute monopolies and oligarchy. So if you can get to that status, it actually provides an exceptional foundation for expanding internationally. And what's really important, as you know, when you build a venture-backed business, is that there's a path to 100 million plus in reoccurring revenue within the initial market that you're starting in. And our opportunity is 10 plus X that with almost no competition. So that's been a huge help to us. But the investor side has been more challenging, although the truth be told, like, you only need a couple of people to have conviction in what you're building. So we, in our Series A, we found Tribe Capital out of San Francisco, a whole bunch of different, guys from Social Capital who have built really impressive businesses like Carta and Slack and a whole bunch of others. And they share the thesis and have been, jet fuel in the engine.
So, and you announced, I guess, a new round was it June of last year, right?
I think it was a year and a half ago.
Okay. I lose track of time. So
that was I think it was done a year and a half ago. And
okay. So what's, I guess at that point when you announce around that size, it's usually a product market fit. How did you know, when did you know things were working? How do you know you had product market fit?
We're an interesting case because the business model wasn't completely novel. As I said, like, it was largely inspired by seeing companies in the States gain a ton of success. When we first started the company, we launched the beta. We got our first close to 100 customers. We were able to bootstrap to almost 15 people. But I would say that the most interesting marker of product market fit for us, and I think it's not normally a good idea to rely on investors to signal that for you. But when we got into YC, there was a specialness to it because both Zenefits and Gusto had gone through YC. And in them funding it, it was kind of like our flag and saying, not only do we believe this could work and become a large company in Canada, but we believe that you guys can do it. So we were already over the hump with the customer thing. And that was kind of like the additional validation that really put us over the hump, I think.
Very cool. A couple more questions about Humi itself, then I want to get into the culture for people looking for new opportunities.
Yeah.
So we're hopefully emerging from COVID, but the fundamental nature of a lot of your clients and how they do the workforce has changed. Lots of them looking at hybrid or distributed teams. How does that impact your ability to serve the customers?
In terms of servicing the customers, all of our processes were digital beforehand, so not a whole lot has changed on that end. But I will say that it has pushed our thesis forward in a really meaningful way. We're not telemedicine. It hasn't gone 1,000% up, but people have gotten infinitely more comfortable with managing their businesses on digital tools. And, even before the pandemic, I would say the Canadian SMB landscape was probably 4 or 5 years behind the States in terms of adoption of technology, and that's pushed it in a very meaningful way. We're seeing a whole lot more companies who are looking to aggregate all those functions into a single, simple online tool.
And I imagine it may have added additional complexity to all those admin work too, right? Because to all the admin work, right? So now I have to worry about where everyone's located, and if they're in different provinces, they have different benefits.
100%. So there's a lot of things to think about. A lot of people will have some sort of hybrid office structure. So you're going to want to have some sort of in-office booking system, which people have been using our time off module for. You want to, be able to onboard people in a really effective manner. It's a really weird thing when you hire somebody and they don't get to physically meet somebody in person. So you want all of the little things around onboarding to flow really well. And there's just a whole bunch of little things like that that'd be impactful.
Cool. And I love to know what do you see Humi looks, how's Humi look like in 10 years? I have a feeling it's going to be around more like financial products, but what we sit down here, it's 2031. What type of company are you describing?
Yeah, so the hope is that it's one of the more impactful companies in the Canadian landscape, not just in terms of value created, but also in the way we support Canadians generally. There are about 50,000 people who are employed through the platform right now. We're well on our way to being 10 to 20x that. And when you get
Wow.
up there, you start talking about like tens of billions of dollars in payroll processed and time off managed and benefits served. It's hard to say exactly what happens 10 years from now, but I think as long as we stay focused and continue to like build things for the Canadian landscape, we can certainly be the dominant force in how people employ people within Canada.
That's pretty big. And then if someone's looking to join Humi, what will make them successful? Why should I join a team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really worth thinking about the stage the company's at and what types of challenges and things you're looking for in a job. We're in this interesting cross section where we're not like the earliest company ever. So there's some formal processes set up, but not a ton. But it's also very exciting. We're currently just under 100 people, likely going to double headcount in the next like year to 2 years. So there's a ton of opportunity to contribute and make an impact, but also to progress within your career. Over and above all those things, the culture is the most important thing. And if you're just looking for a paycheck, it's likely not going to be the right spot. But if you want a combination of impact, potential to have stock options greatly appreciated in the future, to be building with a great group of people, those are the things that would make Humi a really interesting spot to work at.
And can you give us more idea of like the values or culture that you live by?
Yeah, absolutely. So caring about people is number one for us, for two reasons. One is because everything we do, anybody works on here is a system that supports individuals. So it's important that you actually care about those things. And then two, we have a belief internally that your happiness at work is driven largely by two things. One is having an interest in the things that you're working on, and two is actually caring about and or like respecting the people you do that work with. You spend so much time at work; it's such a huge investment to make. I think it's really important to be thoughtful about that, and so that's why we have that as our number one value.
Cool. And what roles are you currently hiring for?
All the roles.
So all the roles. So for someone that
Uh,
doesn't know what that means, I guess that's assume that's sales and developers, but what else?
Sure. So senior engineers, product managers, design and UX. On the CX team, people who have had experience working in SaaS companies and want to be leaders and lead teams internally. If you have experience running payroll, or you have any sort of payroll certification and are looking to get into startups, we exist in this really interesting like nexus between like tech company and traditionally like kind of boring industry. If you find payroll as interesting as I do, awesome. Place for you.
And where can I find out about these roles?
We have a job page on our website. So just go to humi.ca, and there should be a hiring tab or a team page. And then you can read more about company culture, what it's like to work here, perks, etc. And we have all the roles listed.
And we'll include a link to that in the show notes. So and then if someone applies, what's the recruitment process or like the process like? Is it a couple interviews? What should someone expect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you should expect first to have a call with our recruiting team. They're going to make sure that you're a good culture fit for the company. I think it's a vital part of the interview. You don't want to end up at a place where you're not a good culture fit, and I don't think the company wants that as well. And from there on, it really depends on the role that you're hiring for. But it's likely going to involve spending time with the leader on that team and some of the people within the team as well.
Excellent. And what is the one question you wish more candidates asked during the interview process?
Yeah, I think I would say I wish people were a little bit more, not selfish, but self-centered, and
Interesting.
being like upfront and honest about what their ambitions were, for their work life and their career. And I think the better that's known, the easier it is for the company to like find employee work fit, and also be considerate about where they want to help guide you into the future. It's one thing to have a match for the right now. You also want to have a path towards the thing that like you want to be working towards, and having that upfront, honest conversation, or having a candidate be very explicit about what they're looking for, how they want to progress, makes it much easier for us to help, like give them guidance on if this is the right place for you. If so, like what are the tools and resources at that person's disposal? Who are the people who are going to help level that person up, etc.
So it sounds like you're really focusing on the right fit. So someone not only can Humi be successful, but the individual themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that diagram has, the Venn diagram has to overlap, and that's like where the success is, in finding, the right person at the right time, with the right, values for the team.
And Kevin, is there anything I haven't asked about Humi that someone that's interested in joining should know?
It's hard for me to really embody the full culture that we built. There's just so many awesome people internally, and when I say like caring about people, like the truth is that like we want people to be themselves and be able to like enjoy their time at work and have the cross section of like excitement in building something big and important, but also like really enjoying doing it, and the people that are doing it with. You kind of asked about culture, so yeah, I don't think there's anything else.
No, that makes sense. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. We'll make sure in the show notes that people can get sent right to your career page. And I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate your time, Alex, and thank you to everyone listening, and appreciate you making us part of the community.
Well, you're doing great things, and we're a Humi customer ourselves, so we're a small team, but you make us much takes care of some of the admin work for me, and I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the TechTO newsletter to stay informed of what's going on in the Canadian tech ecosystem. We cover everything from company news to career advice to great events like this. So make sure you subscribe. You can go to techto.org/newsletter. If you're listening to this live or listening to this recently, we have a couple great events coming up soon. If you're interested in knowing more about career opportunities, on Wednesday, July 28th, we're hosting a TechTO Talent live stream. We'll be joined by Luke Galea, VP of Engineering at 7 Shifts, Jonathan Klein, Chief Technology Officer at Coho, and they're going to talk about how to manage your career today. So head over to techto.org for registration on all our upcoming events. Finally, this is a big one. People have been asking us, when are we going to get back together in real life? These live streams are great. These podcasts are great, but I want to be able to see someone. So we announced yesterday a return to live events. We're doing a patio dinner, which is happening August 9th in Toronto. We're planning stuff across the country, but we're starting in Toronto. It's going to be an evening out. There'll be dinner. There'll be drinks. You'll be sit at a patio with 5 people, new people to meet at each table. Look for more information on the website. We hope to see you in person. And if you've missed previous episodes, head over to Spotify or Apple podcast, iTunes to listen to our previous conversations on our podcast. Thank you so much and have an amazing day.